Jai.
Vishnupad Paramahamsa Purvajakaracharya Stotra Sat Shishimad, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Jai.
Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai.
Jai.
Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai.
Jai.
Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyama Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai.
Jai.
Vrindavan Ki Jai.
Jai.
Mayapur Ki Jai.
Jai.
Mai Ki Jai.
Jai.
Bhakti Devi Ki Jai.
Jai.
Masi Maharani Ki Jai.
Jai.
Amaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai.
Jai.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna. Hare
To
Krishna.
the assembled devotees.
Hare
All
Krishna.
glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare
All
Krishna.
glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Namo.
Hare
Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale. Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurani Pachayane Nevasheshani Bhakti Bhastadadi Shatarine. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om
Om
Namo
Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 13, Dhritarashtra quits home, Text 17. Evam griheshu saktanam pramatanam tarihaya atyakramada vigyata kala paramadushtara. Evam griheshu saktanam pramatanam tarihaya atyakramada vigyata kala paramadushtara. Evam griheshu saktanam pramatanam tarihaya atyakramada vigyata kala paramadushtara. Everyone chant, please.
Hare Krishna. Evam graheshu saktanam pramattanam tadihaya atyakramada vigyatah kalah paramadustarah.
Hare Krishna. Evam grihesu saktanam pramattanam tadihaya atyakarmada vigyatah kala paramadustarah. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Evam griheshu saktanam pramattanam tadihaya atyakramad abhignata kala paramadushtara. Hare Krishna.
Evam griheshu saktanam pramattanam tadihaya atyakramad avignata kala paramadushtara.
Hare Krishna. Evam griheshu saktanam pramattanam tadiyaya atyakramad avigyata kalaha paramadustaraha.
Anyone else? Word for word translation. Evam, thus. Griheshu, in the family affairs. Saktanam, of persons who are too attached. Pramattanam, insanely attached. Tat ihaya, engrossed in such thoughts. Atyakramat, surpassed. Avigyata, imperceptibly. Kala, eternal time. parama, supremely, dustara, insurmountable. Translation: insurmountable, eternal time imperceptibly overcomes those who are too much attached to family affairs and are always engrossed in their thoughts. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. And the beginning, I'm just saying, the beginning of this purport is amazing, really brilliant. Purport, quote, I am now happy. I have everything in order. My bank balance is quite enough. I can now give my children enough estate. I am now successful. The poor beggar sannyasis depend on God, but they come to beg from me. Therefore, I am more than the supreme God. Unquote. These are some of the thoughts which engross the insanely attached householder who is blind to the passing of eternal time. Our duration of life is measured, and no one is able to enhance it even by a second against the scheduled time ordained by the supreme will. Such valuable time, especially for the human being, should be cautiously spent, because even a second passed away imperceptibly cannot be replaced, even in exchange for thousands of golden coins amassed by hard labor. Every second of human life is meant for making an ultimate solution to the problems of life, i.e., repetition of birth and death, and revolving in the cycle of 8,400,000 different species of life. The material body, which is subject to birth and death, diseases, and old age, is the cause of all sufferings of the living being. Otherwise, the living being is eternal. He is never born, nor does he ever die. Foolish persons forget this problem. They do not know at all how to solve the problems of life, but become engrossed in temporary family affairs, not knowing that eternal time is passing away imperceptibly and that their measured duration of life is diminishing every second. Without any solution to the big problem, namely repetition of birth and death, disease, and old age. This is called illusion. But such illusion cannot work on one who is awake in the devotional service of the Lord. Yudhishthira Maharaj and his brothers, the Pandavas, were all engaged in the service of Lord Sri Krishna, and they had very little attraction for the illusory happiness of this material world. As we have discussed previously, Maharaj Yudhishthira was fixed in the service of the Lord Mukunda, the Lord who can award salvation, and therefore he had no attraction even for such comforts of life as are available in the kingdom of heaven, because even the happiness obtained on the planet Brahmaloka is also temporary and illusory. Because the living being is eternal, he can be happy only in the eternal abode of the kingdom of God, Paravyom, from which no one returns to this region of repeated birth and death, disease, and old age. Therefore, any comfort of life or any material happiness which does not warrant an eternal life is but illusion for the eternal living being. One who understands this factually is learned, and such a learned person can sacrifice any amount of material happiness to achieve the desired goal known as Brahma Sukham, or absolute happiness. Real transcendentalists are hungry for this happiness. And as a hungry man cannot be made happy by all comforts of life minus foodstuff, so the man hungry for eternal absolute happiness cannot be satisfied by any amount of material happiness. Therefore, the instruction described in this verse cannot be applied to Maharaj Yudhishthira or his brothers and mother. It was meant for persons like Dhritarashtra, for whom Vidura came especially to impart lessons. Evam griheshu saktanam pramatanam tadihaya atyakramadavigyata Kala Paramadustaraha. Insurmountable eternal time imperceptibly overcomes those who are too much engrossed in to family affairs. Who are too much attached to family affairs and are always engrossed in their thought. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pishtai Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Devashesha Shunyavadi Paschara Deshatarane. Hare Krishna. Thank you to all of those who are here today. Yesterday was an ecstatic day, but it was also, at least for me, was a tiring day. So those of you who had the get up and go to get up and come to class, thank you very much. I appreciate it. So this is another awesome verse, also kind of a transition verse in the story and the narrations of the Bhagavatam. Up to here, we've been hearing about the Pandavas. And in the verse before, especially, not the verse before, which one, going back a little bit, talking about the Pandavas, their opulence, their greatness. And then there's this verse talking about the very attached householders. And Prabhupada, basing this on Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on this verse, in the second half, the second paragraph, this purport is basically just two long paragraphs. The second paragraph he bases on Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, where he states very simply, actually, he just says, this verse does not apply to Yudhishthira and the Pandavas. This applies to Dhritarashtra and those like him. So he's making that point. We may think, oh, what's the need to make that point? We know who Yudhishthira is and the Pandavas. But if you could imagine, this is the very beginning, really still in the beginning of the first canto, not even halfway through the first canto yet of the Bhagavatam. So imagine a completely naive reader of the Bhagavatam who may not know about Yudhishthira and the Pandavas and their great qualities. And he's been hearing about the Yudhishthira and the Pandavas, and then there's this verse, and he may think, oh, this applies to Yudhishthira. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is making the point, no, this does not apply to Yudhishthira. He's a different category of person, not like these ordinary bewildered grihastas. And as evidence, to support this evidence, he gives a verse from the previous chapter, chapter 12 of the first canto, text 6, which says, Kim te kama surasparha mukunda manaso dvija adi jarur madam ragya kshuditasya yate tare. That Kim te kama surasparha, that the opulence of Yudhishthira was so amazing that the demigods were envious. The demigods were envious seeing the great opulence of the Pandavas. We've heard before about the heavenly planets and how the heavenly planets is such a mixed bag, that there's a lot of distractions, but there's also a lot of amazing wealth and sense gratification. But all that wealth that the demigods have, they were still envious of the opulence of Yudhishthira. Kim te kama surasparha mukunda manaso dvijaha. But Yudhishthira, what was his interest? His only interest was mukunda manaso. Mukunda manaso means the mind fixed on Mukunda, or we could say Krishna consciousness. Adi Jahur Mudam Ragya, his only happiness, his only satisfaction was Mukunda Manasa, Krishna consciousness, fixing his mind on Lord Mukunda. Kshuditasya yate tere. Kshudita means he was hungry. He had an appetite. He was hungry for this, for devotion to Krishna, for fixing his mind on Lord Mukunda. So although his opulence was so great, he had no interest in any of that. He was only hungry, desiring, and his only source of happiness that could satisfy that hunger, that yearning, was Mukunda Manaso, fixing his mind on Mukunda. And Prabhupada doesn't quote this verse, but he references it indirectly in today's purport when he says, Maharaj Yudhishthira was fixed in the service of Lord Mukunda, and therefore he had no attraction even for such comforts of life as are available in the kingdom of heaven. So that to me says that he's referencing this verse from the previous chapter from Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti's commentary without mentioning the verse specifically. And he also mentions that real transcendentalists are hungry for this happiness, which is almost directly saying mudam ragyak shudi tasya, that they're hungry for the happiness of Krishna consciousness. Real transcendentalists are hungry for this happiness. And as a hungry man cannot be made happy by all comforts of life, minus foodstuff, so the man hungry for eternal absolute happiness cannot be satisfied by any amount of material happiness. So we have on the one hand, amazing devotees, all devotees, like Yudhishthira. They may have this great opulence like Yudhishthira, even envied by the demigods, or they may have no possessions at all, like Shukadev or some other sage in the forest. But it doesn't matter. Their only happiness, their only hunger, their only appetite is for Mukunda Manaso, for Krishna consciousness. And then on the other side are the materialistic people who also have a great hunger. They're also so hungry, so desirous. I want wealth. I want a mate. I want sense gratification. I want power. I want influence. All of these things. So this is the transition, that transitioning from talking about the Pandavas to describing these materialistic persons is in preparation for the next section of this chapter, describing Vidura preaching to his very fallen and very fallen brother Dhritarashtra. And in the next verse it says that actually, where was I? Yes, in the next verse it says that Vidura knew this, therefore he addressed Dhritarashtra. So this is the point of this verse, or where this verse, today's verse, is taking us to this next part of the Bhagavatam. And one last thing, just to cement this, in the purport of that verse from the previous chapter, 112.6, that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur quotes, in the purport, Prabhupada, just like this purport, starts off with a very powerful statement from Prabhupada, which I'll reread in a moment. In that purport also, he makes a very important point. He says, there are two things in the world which can satisfy living beings. When one is materially engrossed, he is satisfied only by sense gratification. But when one is liberated from the conditions of the material modes, he is satisfied only by rendering loving service for the satisfaction of the Lord. Every living entity has desires. Every living entity has kshuditasya, has a hunger, a yearning within him. Desires, Prabhupada said, desire is a symptom of life. So we're jivas, we're eternally alive. So we have a hunger, we have a thirst within us. And when we're foolish, when we're ignorant, when we're forgetful of our nature and the nature of this world and the nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then we try to satisfy that deep hunger with sense gratification, and we're never satisfied. And if we have, by the mercy of Krishna, by the mercy of Guru, by the mercy of Shastra, by the mercy of the preaching of all the merciful devotees, we come to understand our nature and the nature of this world and our relationship with Krishna, then we know to seek our happiness in that eternal relationship with Krishna. So Yudhishthira was obviously the latter, and the former are the gross materialists who think in this very perverted way. It's almost funny. It's so intense in today's purport. I am now happy. I have everything in order. My bank balance is quite enough. I can now give my children enough estate. I am now successful. The poor beggar sannyasis depend on God, but they come to beg from me. Therefore, I am more than the supreme God. What a ignorant and twisted mentality, and an awful kind of logic that, oh, I'm giving a donation to the sannyasis. That makes me more than them. They're depending on God. So therefore, I am more than God. What kind of twisted mentality, not understanding that everything that that materialistic person has is actually coming from God himself. So this is the position of the materialistic persons. Basically, evam griheshu saktanam. The key of it is that they're too attached to family life. This is the grihastas, not the grihastas, the grihamedis, the fallen grihastas, who don't accept grihasta as an ashram. Prabhupada explains many times, ashram means a shelter for attaining spiritual perfection. And that is what family life is supposed to be, as exemplified by Yudhishthira and the Pandavas. But if you enter family life like one of these materialistic persons who think they don't need God, who think they're better than God, who think that the only thing that will satisfy me is sense gratification, material things, material objects, material control, then that's not grihasta, that's grihamedi. So this attachment to family life is a big problem. Look at Dhritarashtra. His whole hellish condition is because of that. He had a son who was so awful, who was so terrible, and caused the destruction practically of the entire Kshatriya dynasty, almost completely destroyed, and so much havoc and so much sin and so much violence committed. And we saw how all that violence beat on Yudhishthira's heart. But that was all because of Dhritarashtra's attachment to his son, to his family, and his attachment to his position. Oh, I didn't get to be king. My brother, my half-brother Pandu got to be king, but I didn't get to be king. I'll make my son king. So this attachment to position, this is the exemplar of the materialist. What will make me happy? What is my hunger? What is my thirst? To be king, to make my son king, to make my family king. And anyone who's in the way of that is my enemy. And therefore, all the intrigues against the Pandavas were based on this materialistic mentality. And because of that, not only that, but even after the Kurukshetra war was over and Dhritarashtra was living at the mercy of Yudhishthira and the Pandavas. And even we also heard, going back a few months, we heard how Yudhishthira was so polite and so respectful, giving all honor to Dhritarashtra and maintaining him and creating the illusion for Dhritarashtra's own happiness and peace of mind, creating the illusion that he was a king with some power, with some influence, by letting him, do some official duties here and there and satisfying him. A sane person should not have accepted that. That was actually, Dhritarashtra thought, oh, how nice, Yudhishthira is recognizing me as king. But it's actually a degradation that he was falsely accepting this at the mercy of those who killed his whole family. It's actually degrading. And this is a lot of the basis of Vidura's preaching to him in the upcoming verses. So these are the materialistic persons, these materialistic householders. Now we heard in last Sunday's class, we heard the verse Prabhupada described in the purport, how Yudhishthira and the Pandavas, although they're householders, they were as good, completely equal, just as qualified as renunciates like Vidura or other renunciants. And we discussed so many types of renunciates and grihastas. So they're just as good. The Pandavas are just as good as any sannyasi, as any sage in the forest. But at the same time, the grihasta has to be a little bit humble, because it's true that a qualified grihasta is as good, or Prabhupada said better than a brahmachari. I also told that incident last week where Prabhupada said that a grihasta who can control his senses and carry on Krishna consciousness, even in the presence of an attractive and willing mate, is better than a brahmachari. And also Prabhupada said that his married couple devotees who were going out to boldly preach, just like the devotees Guru Das and Yamuna and Mukunda, who went to England to preach very early in ISKCON movement. He said they're as good as any sannyasis, as any traveling preachers. So that's true, but the grihasta has to be a little humble, because the situation is a little, there are temptations, there are risks that are part of the grihasta ashram that a sannyasi, at least a qualified sannyasi, doesn't have to deal with so much. He's living with wife, or she's living with husband and living with children and family. And these are natural objects of affection. And if one is not very, very careful, this natural affection can morph and twist into the insane attachment of the materialistic householder. Therefore, those of us who are grihastas have to be very humble in our position. I think it was Yudhishthira himself. Yes, Yudhishthira himself in the 7th canto. We know in the 7th canto, Yudhishthira gets a lot of instruction about Varnashram Dharma from Narada Muni. And at the beginning, actually I'm trying to remember, in the 13th chapter of the 7th canto, Narada Muni explains to Yudhishthira about all the different kinds of renunciates, the sannyasis, the vanaprasthas, the brahmacharis, who are all completely renounced, more or less without personal possessions, 100% without sexual relationships, completely renounced, those three classes. Then at the beginning of the next chapter, chapter 14, Yudhishthira says to Narada, yes, you've explained to me very nicely about these three ashrams for his renunciants, but what about those of us who are griha mudhadi? Griha mudhadi, we know these words. Griha means house or householder. Mudha means a fool. And di means our mind, our intelligence, our meditation. So what about those of us who are griha mudhadi, who are foolishly, ignorantly absorbed in family life? What are we to do? And then Narada explains very eloquently and carefully about a proper execution of grihasta ashram. So the grihastas are just as good, but this humility is important. Yudhishthira does it. Many cases where grihasta devotees meet renounced sages, and the principle is always humility, even if they're great devotees, as qualified as the sage themselves. They always maintain that humility, because the danger and the temptation of grihasta ashram is there. And that's described in today's verse. Saktanam, evam griheshu saktanam. Saktanam means overly attached, too attached. Family affection is a normal and healthy thing. And in fact, children who grow up in a family without that will grow up with a lot of psychological problems. So, and not only that, even for the adults, it's necessary. Affectionate dealings with family members is very proper and very healthy, but it needs to be balanced. It needs to be balanced in quantity, and it needs to be balanced in quality. Yes, we're affectionate for our children, for our wife, our husband, our grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, whatever it may be. But out of that affection, you don't sacrifice your own life. You don't sacrifice your spiritual life, your Krishna consciousness for that. And you don't sacrifice their life and Krishna consciousness for that. It has to be balanced in amount and in quality as well. If you actually love your mate, if you actually love your children, then that means you want to give them the best thing possible. And the materialist thinks, oh, give them the best things possible. Just like Prabhupada says in today's purport, I have a good bank balance so I could leave my children a good inheritance. So they're thinking, oh, I leave my children money, fine. Or I put my children through college, fine, I'm giving them the best thing. But a devotee knows that the best thing, prema pamartha mahan, that the best thing, the greatest wealth is Krishna consciousness. So if you actually love your children, you want to give them the greatest thing, which is Krishna consciousness, the eternal benefit, the bank balance that will never run out. Just like there's so many stories of unqualified people who get a big inheritance from their parents and spend it foolishly, and then they're left poor as beggars. But if you give your children Krishna consciousness, if you give your mate Krishna consciousness, then you benefit eternally and they benefit eternally. So saktanam, attachment, normal attachment is there, but not excessive or materialistic attachment that blocks one's Krishna consciousness. And what's the nature of that over-attachment? Pramata, that's also a word in today's verse. Pramatanam, that it becomes madness, that the over-attached person is actually mad. And sometimes extreme case, rare case, extreme case, but sometimes there's so much affection, someone loves someone so much that they may end up committing murder. Oh, I love this person so much, but they're married, so I'm going to kill their husband. This is pramatam, out of attachment, out of affection. You're committing awful crimes and hurting yourself and hurting the other person and destroying any normal concept of love and affection in the process. So pramata, this is madness. And madness means being mad, or one idea of being mad is that even you know what the right thing to do is, but if you're mad, you'll do the wrong thing. Just like if you love someone too much in a materialistic way, you could be driven to do things that you know are wrong, that you know are degrading, that you know are harmful. So pramata, in other words, don't jettison your principles of Krishna consciousness for the sake of family affection. I'll say again, family affection is normal. Family affection is healthy, but it has to be intelligently managed and cultivated in a way that supports our Krishna consciousness and not degrading it. Pandava, Yudhishthira and the Pandavas had such great examples of family affection, their love for each other and their love for their mother, and caring for each other and caring for their relatives. Just like when Vidura came, oh, how are our dear friends and relatives, the Yadus, doing? So the affection is there, but it's all in Krishna consciousness. And the materialistic person lets that affection destroy their Krishna consciousness. So pramata. And again, next word, ihaya, tad ihaya, too much engrossed in family affection. Too much means too much engrossed mentally and too much engrossed physically in family affection. Too much engrossed mentally means all you could think of is family life, with no mental energy, no mental capacity left to think of Krishna, to meditate on Krishna. And then too much engrossed physically, practically, that I'm working all day long to maintain my family and enjoy with my family. And oh, I have no time to chant. I have no time to serve. I'm getting some salary, but oh, I have to spend every penny of it on my family. I can't give a donation to Krishna. So too much engrossed mentally and too much engrossed practically is also the fall down of the Grihastha ashram. That you have no energy, you have no time, you have no bodily strength, you have no money, you have no intelligence left over from your family activities to devote to Krishna. Prabhupada would often speak saying that we have a certain amount of human energy, and that if we don't devote that energy to Krishna, then it'll be used up and drained away in materialistic activities. So we have we all know to some degree, we know what our energy level is, what our capacity is. We know what our bank balance is and what our income is. And the intelligent person will know how to balance that family duties and Krishna conscious duties so that the Krishna consciousness is free to grow and to increase throughout that. And the materialistic person, it's all taken over by family activities. One time Prabhupada was speaking about preaching in India. Don't take this as a statement against India or against Indians. I love Indians. Prabhupada loved Indians. He counted on the Indians for so much, but sometimes he would also become frustrated when preaching to Indians. Someone came, or he said once, when an Indian person comes to me, they always want to give advice. Swamiji, you should run your movement like this. You should do like this. You should manage like this. And Prabhupada said, yes, advice gratis. Gratis means free. So advice they give for free. But when I ask them to help, they immediately say, oh, no, I have to go arrange my daughter's marriage. I can't help. So advice gratis. But when the time comes to actually do something, oh, family attachment takes over. So we don't want to be like that. So this is Prabhupada wrote a very nice BTG article long time ago, way back in 1956. I think he published this. And the title of the article was No Time, a Chronic Disease of the Common Man. Very nice article, old article in 1956 with the sometimes quaint English of that time. It starts off, when we approach some gentleman and request him to become a reader of Back to Godhead, because at that time he was producing Back to Godhead magazine all by himself and going door to door and even sitting at the tea stalls selling copies of Back to Godhead, doing street sankirtan, selling his magazine. So he said, when we approach some gentleman and request him to become a reader of Back to Godhead, sometimes we are replied with the words, no time. They say that they are too busy in earning money for maintaining the body and soul together. But when we ask them what do they mean by the soul, they have nothing to reply. And then he continues in that article, he gives the example of some famous people from that Indians in the 1950s would have known. Some famous people who had died. He talked about one medical man. He was a famous, I can't remember the name, a famous medical man, and all of his sons had become doctors as well. But he died, and when the time came for him to die, all of his medical knowledge and all of his many family members who were also doctors, none of them could save him. And he gave several examples like that of contemporary Indian celebrities or well-known people who had no time, but then time took care of them. And he continues, therefore, death has been described in the Bhagavat as Duranta Virya, or the indefatigable. So this is death, this is time. And this is, again, going back to today's awesome verse, Kala Parama Dushtara. Kala is Parama Dushtara, supremely insurmountable. This is the same as this word Prabhupada is using here. Duranta Virya means powerful, and Duranta means very, very difficult, you can't overcome. So death is Duranta Virya, or Parama Dushtara. It's indefatigable, it's insurmountable. And the very foolish materialistic people, again going to today's verse, Atya Kramad Avigyata Kala Parama Dushtara. Atya Krama, this is also interesting. Atya Kramad is Ati Krama. We know this word Krama, just like Lord Vamanadeva is called Trivikram, because he took 3 big steps. Kram, 3 steps. Trivikram, or Urukrama, who performs amazing activities or takes giant steps. So Krama means step, and Ati means to surpass or to go beyond. So the time factor is atyakramad or atikrama. It surpasses all of our activities. It takes one step beyond all of our activities, all of our endeavors, whatever we may amass, whatever we may accomplish, whatever we may do in the material sphere. The time factor manifested as death is one step beyond that and takes care of all of it. Atikramad. And then because they're not aware of that, these foolish grihamedis are called avigyata. Gya means knowledge. Avigyata means you're ignorant or unaware of it. So this is death. Duranta virya, the time factor. Again, Prabhupada uses this word Duranta virya. This is from the 11th canto. Also the teachings of Narada Muni to Vasudeva, Krishna's father. He says it's na pashyanti duranta virya, which means exactly the same thing. Na pashyanti means they don't see. The materialistic householders don't see na pashyanti duranta virya, this indefatigable death. So this is the time factor, which is overtaking everyone, overtaking everything. Kala parama dushtara, overcomes everything. Or as Bhagavad Gita says, kalosmi lokakshaya krit pravidha. First he says, kalosmi. Krishna says, I am time. Then you may say, okay, Krishna's time. So what does that mean? What does time do? Lokakshaya krit pravidho. I am just destroyer of all the worlds. And lokan samahartam iha pravrita. And not only I'm destroying all the worlds, but I'm destroying all the persons, all the people in the world are being destroyed by the time factor. So this is what time is. Time is a very complicated thing to understand, especially in philosophy and in physics. There's a lot of discussion of what time actually is. What is its nature? Does it even really exist? Old philosopher Aristotle said about time that when I think about it within my mind, I conclude that I definitely know and understand what time is. But when I try to explain time to someone else, then I see that I actually don't understand it at all. So time is a very complicated factor, but one aspect of it that as devotees we can focus on and that Krishna focuses on is that time is that which wastes everything away, destroys everything. Today I have brown hair. Tomorrow that brown hair is taken away and I have gray hair or no hair. Today I have smooth skin. The time factor comes, takes away that smooth skin. I'm all wrinkles. Today I'm a rich man. Time comes and takes it away and I'm a poor man. Today I'm a live person. Tomorrow I'm a corpse. Not me, the soul is a corpse, but what I think of me. Because I'm a materialistic person, I think of myself as the body. So my life is taken away. This is time, taking everything away. So if someone is a little bit at least intelligent, a little concerned with beyond the body, beyond materialistic life, with eternal benefit, with the spirit soul, if you're a little bit concerned, you will naturally want to inquire. You will want to think, what is the actual benefit I can get that time will not take away? Because time takes away everything: wealth, family, love, power, influence, your body, all gone, all taken away. So an intelligent person, what benefit can I get that time will not take away? To quote from the Bible says, lay not up your treasures where moth and rust doth corrupt. Don't lay up your treasures where the time factor can destroy them, take them away. So we want the eternal benefit, the eternal wealth. And sense gratification as a benefit, as a kind of wealth, is the very lowest and most meager type of wealth. Just like also I discussed last week in the Sunday Feast lecture, antavat tu palam tesham, that all the materialistic benefits, antavat tu palam tesham, their fruits, their results, their benefits that are useless because they all come to an end. They're all susceptible to the time factor. These kind of benefits that time can steal away, that look like a benefit but really aren't, are called preyas. That means an immediate benefit, a short-term benefit. And the other type of benefit is called shreyas, or the ultimate benefit, the eternal benefit, the absolute benefit that not only time cannot take away, but a benefit that takes us beyond time, beyond the effect of time. So we want shreyas, not preyas. We want eternal benefit, not temporary benefit. Prabhupada writes about this. This is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He says, there are two kinds of general activities, shreyas, or activities which are ultimately beneficial and auspicious, and preyas, or those which are immediately beneficial and auspicious. For example, and this is a great, very simple, great example. For example, children are fond of playing. They do not want to go to school to receive an education, and they think that to play all day and night and enjoy with their friends is the aim of life. So this is an excellent materialistic example, that within the material sphere, a child wants to play. He doesn't want to go to school. He thinks, playing is my benefit. It's my happiness. It's my wealth. So just play day and night, and go to school. Oh, that's work and learning. I don't want to bother. But for his ultimate benefit, if he wants to have a happy life as an adult, the higher benefit is to restrict the playing somewhat and go to school so that you could get an education, get a degree, and make a living. So this is the material example Prabhupada gives. Shreyas gives a quick benefit that leads to your own degradation. If you're thinking only sense gratification, only wealth, only materialistic things, you may get that. And even then, not everyone gets it who wants it. But even you get it, you may get a little pleasure, but in the ultimate sense, it will not satisfy you. So therefore, shreyas, the person has to be certain, the intelligent person is seeking out shreyas, jigyasu shreya uttamam, inquiry about the highest benefit, shreyas. So this is the intelligent person, this is the intelligent inquiry. What is my highest benefit? Therefore, going back to the very beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, this is the first question of the sages at Naimisharanya. What is the highest benefit? Tatra, tachanjana yushman, bhavata yad vinischitam, pumsam ekantita shreyas, tanna samsitum arhasi. They're asking about shreyas. The actual word is there. Tacha tachanjayas sayushman. They're saying, oh, Sutta, first they're offering some kind words. May you be blessed with a long life. Bhavata yad vinischitam. You've heard from Shukadev Goswami, and you yourself are most intelligent and most qualified. So because of that, give us your determination. Your determination of what? Pumsam ekantita shreyas. What is the shreyas? What is the ultimate benefit? Ekantita, the absolute number one ultimate benefit. Pumsam, for all people at all times and in all places. Tanna samshitam arhasi. So because those sages were so intelligent, they inquired, what is shreyas? And of course, later on, I guess in the next chapter, in chapter 2 of the first canto, he gives the answer. What is the highest benefit? The highest shreyas? Savai pumsam paro dharmo yato bhaktirad hoksuje ahaitukya pratiyata yayatma supersedati. That this is the highest benefit, savai pumsam, for all persons. Paro dharmo, the highest activity, the highest pursuit, the highest dharma, the highest duty that anyone can pursue. Yato bhaktirad hoksuje. Krishna consciousness, bhakti adhoksaja, devotional service unto the supreme transcendental personality of Godhead. And what's the nature of that devotional service? Ahaitukya pratiyata. It has to be ahaituki, ahetu, without any material motivation. So in other words, what that means is you can't use shreyas as an excuse, as a support for your prayas. Ahaituki means, hetu means cause or motivation. So if your motivation for Krishna consciousness is that I want wealth, so I'll worship Krishna for some wealth, you may get that or you may not, but this is not ahaituki. This is using the greatest thing, devotional service to Krishna, for supplying the very meager temporary prayas. And the other qualities, apratiyata. Apratiyata means completely unbroken. Because if you're materially motivated, if you worship Krishna to get some wealth, then when you get your wealth, oh, I got my wealth and no need to worship Krishna anymore. So ahaitukya pratiyata is the quality of devotional service we need. And that quality is directly opposite of the nature and quality of the attached grihasta. The attached grihasta cannot worship Krishna unmotivated because he's motivated by family affection and lust and greed and anger and madness, illusion, envy. And I need wealth and I need position and I need power. So he can't be a haituki. He can't worship Krishna just because it's his absolute highest natural duty. And he can't do it apratiyata because, as we discussed earlier, so much of his time and so much of his mental energy is taken up by materialistic pursuits that how can your worship of Krishna be unbroken? Rather, you're lucky if you could squeeze in 5 minutes of devotion to Krishna in a day of 23 hours and 55 minutes of materialistic pursuits. So this is the lesson for those of us grihastas, that we have the opportunity to pursue Krishna consciousness equal or better than any brahmachari, any vanaprast, any sannyasi. There's no obstacle. There's no nothing preventing us from doing that. But if we're not careful and if we're not humble in our pursuit, then we could let this dysfunctional side of family affection gain too much power, and then our devotional service will become motivated instead of unmotivated. It will become more and more broken instead of unbroken, and sadly, even it sometimes happens that it may stop entirely. So this is what we can learn from this verse. Be like Yudhishthira, don't be like Dhritarashtra. Yudhishthira is our example, a grihasta, a responsible person in every way, but his only hunger, his only thirst was Mukunda Manaso. How can I fix my mind on Mukunda? And Dhritarashtra is the opposite. How can I make my son the king? How can I live in the illusion that I'm a king, that I get respect? How can I live in this illusory world? So this is one lesson of this verse, the great opportunity of grihasta life and the great potential danger of grihasta life. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Any question, comments, or discussion?
Thank you so very much, Prabhuji, for wonderful session as usual. And it's after the Rath Yatra, it's a very, very energetic session you had. You made lots of points to preach Lord Jagannath. So yeah. So Yudhishthira Maharaj is very, very dear to Lord Jagannath. Yeah. Thank you so very much, Prabhuji, for wonderful session.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
If anybody is having, like any comment, question, please go ahead, unmute and go ahead. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Mother.
As he said, a very nice class, very important
points I think are being talked about. My question is, how do we see that Dhritarashtra in ourselves? It's so easy to see Dhritarashtra in others, but for so many years, I have been listening, but still not lifting that foot off. So how do we?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question and a hard question. We think we've been devotees a year, 5 years, 10 years, however many years, and it's natural. We think, yes, I'm a devotee. So it's natural we think like that. But where is it? I can't remember the source, but Prabhupada, I'll have to look this up after class to see if I can find, but Prabhupada says how we should always remember how we were our previous life when we were not devotees, when we were fallen. We should remember that to sort of keep us in that humble position that, okay, I've been a devotee for, 5, 10, 20, 50 years, whatever. But, balance that against a gazillion lifetimes in the material world, not being a devotee, being a materialist, like Dhritarashtra, worse than Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra at least got to associate with these amazing devotees and ultimately was kind of saved. So, we could consider ourselves worse than Dhritarashtra in many ways. And there are expressions of humility from devotees. I'm lower than this, I'm lower than that. So we can remember that. We also can't imitate that. There's a story, I haven't been able to find it in print or in the database, but it's a popular old ISKCON story. That one devotee said like this to Prabhupada, "Oh, Prabhupada, he said, Prabhupada, I'm the most fallen." And Prabhupada reportedly said, "You're not the most anything." So even in our fallenness, we have to be, we should be a little humble. We should be humble about our fallenness also. Not that I'm the most fallen. But yeah, it's important to remember that, to look at our bad past, to be introspective enough to see how even in the present, how I'm falling short so much. There's another story. I'm not sure where this idea originated, but it's I like it very much. And it goes like this, that in Satya Yuga, the demons lived on one planet and the demigods lived on another planet. Just like you hear in the Bhagavatam, how the demigods and demons would have these big interplanetary battles. Then in Treta Yuga, the demons and the demigods would live in different countries. Just like Lord Ram was in Ayodhya and Ravana was in Lanka. And in Dwapara Yuga, they were in different kingdoms, both within Bharatavarsha, just like, Pandavas and Yudhishthira, or even within the same family, the demons and the devotees. And in Kali Yuga, the demons and the devotees live together within the same person. So we all have that. We have our demonic side, or certainly I have my demonic side, which we recognize and fight against and try to suppress with varying degrees of success, and try to overcome by performing devotional service. So that humility, that's why I mentioned the humility, that even someone like Yudhishthira, we're hearing today how excellent Yudhishthira is, but when he presents himself before Narada Muni, he says, "Yes, I'm a Grihamudadi, I'm a foolish, unqualified Grihastha." And I think also when Garga Muni came to Vrindavan for Krishna's Namakarana, I think he also made some humble presentation like that, oh, you sages come for the sake of us, fallen Grihastas. So this is good. I don't have like any trick or, step one, do this, step two, but I'll just reiterate what you said, that it's important to remember that we're devotees. We could be confident. We could say, yes, I'm a devotee, but we could also say I'm a devotee who also has these so many shortcomings and so many things I'm working on and so many faults that also disqualify in so many ways, and humbly approach Krishna and approach the other devotees and approach our spiritual master and approach Srila Prabhupada for help with those things. But I like that. That's an important thing to remember.
Yeah. So, in Damodar Lila, we hear that Yashoda tried to tie him up for a very long time, but she was eventually able to only when Krishna allowed her to. Dhritarashtra was also getting these sermons from Vidura all along. He listened to Vidura every night. But he did not accept it. And I wonder, what is it that allowed him to accept it this time, allowed him to hear it?
One thing maybe is that sometimes if someone is in a materially good position or powerful position, they may not be willing to hear from a sadhu. Sometimes sometimes we may need to be smashed a little bit by material nature before we're receptive. So that's one reason why it might have taken so long for Dhritarashtra to hear from his brother, that he couldn't hear from him while he still had this hope that, oh, I could be king, or my son can be king, or I can have this position, or I can have this opulence, or whatever. And that needed to be smashed by actually many years. And his whole family being destroyed in the Kurukshetra war. And then on the one hand being offered this respect by Yudhishthira, which was actually degrading. And then Vidura pointing that out to him. Look at how degraded you've become. So sometimes that's what it takes. That not everyone, when they hear the absolute truth, will just say, oh, just examine it with their intelligence. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, I'm going to surrender. Sometimes that happens, but a lot of times it won't happen because a person is just too confident in either in their material position or in their aspiration for some material position, and they're simply not ready to hear it.
I guess then it is Krishna coming as Kala. It is time, with
yes,
time.
that's all.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's also Krishna preaching to us.
Yes.
What's that? Prabhupada said about himself, that he had good, successful business, and repeatedly that business was all taken away from him. All his wealth, all his business was taken away from him. And what was these? What's that? Bhagavatam, Hari Shetadhanam Shanai. How does that start? That Krishna says, when I'm feeling especially merciful to my devotees, then I take everything away.
Right.
And then actually, this is actually very significant to today's verse. When Krishna takes everything away, what happens? All his family rejects him.
Yeah.
So sometimes that's what it takes. That your family rejects you, because that will destroy the family attachment, which is such an important part of this material conditioning. So Krishna will take it away, and you'll be rejected, and you'll have no other shelter. As long as we're thinking, there's that other verse which I can't remember, about the fallible soldiers. The wife, the children, the friends, the family, the wealth, these are all fallible soldiers. So as long as you're depending on these fallible soldiers, you won't be able to take the real protection of Krishna. But when those are taken away from you, either by your intelligence or by the preaching of a devotee or by Krishna as time, when those are taken away, then you might be more likely to actually take the proper shelter of Krishna.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Thank you, Mother. Any other question or comment? Okay. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. I don't know what the announcement is for Sunday feast tonight. Unfortunately, I think it's supposed to be rainy, so we'll see how that turns out. Anything from the temple about that?
I did not get any announcement information, but I saw the email that came out this morning. All of you who were busy doing service for the Rath Yatra and missed the play, they're going to be doing the play and for the Sunday feast today.
Oh,
So-
awesome.
So rain or not, please everybody come so that you can see that play.
That will be at regular class time or after class?
From the newsletter, it sounded to me like it was going to happen at Sunday Feast. I'm not sure if
Okay.
anybody's scheduled. If somebody is scheduled, then I guess they'll do both, but
Okay,
the play is going to be on, so
excellent. Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, Hare Krishna. Thank you
Hare
once again, everybody, for kindly attending. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha.
Sindhuvayo cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namo. Ananta
Hare
koti
Krishna.
Srila Prabhupada. Thank you very much, Prabhuji.